I'm going to do this problem in pieces. You have this, it's a system of DDS. It's the first, you asked me last week, when are we going to start this? Well, I'm glad I started it a little bit early because we're starting it now. So the first step is to transform this discrete dynamical system. And they tell you in the problem itself that there's two variables. There's Wn sub n and R sub n. This means that you're going to have two equations. So I'm going to set this up in a table format, just like we did with a system of one, when you just have one linear equation, a DDS. So my time goes in weeks, so I still have this n here. And I have these working servers, that's W sub n. So it's a number of working servers. Notice that I line up my headers really well. That good practices, if you started out with good practices, then you're going to just keep continuing that. If you didn't start out with it, there's no time like the present to do this. The other variable is Rn, which is the number of servers. Notice I don't put servers, I put number of servers. It's a quantity, so I'm very descriptive in my headers. The next thing is that they give me the initial condition. Here, right, you start the week off with 80 working servers. And according to this, hidden in this is that there's nothing to repair. That's not explicitly stated. This is often the case when you're reading someone else's problem that you don't really know what they're assuming and they forgot to tell you. But they're assuming that there was nothing to repair until this dust storm came. So this Rn at 0 is 0. How do you get to the next step? Same as when we had one equation. Well, first of all, I have lost 10% because they're broken. So those 10% are lost from the working servers. So I started out with 80 and I lost 10%. They say that 55% of the servers are going to be repaired. There's nothing in here, but if there was, 55% of those would come back to be working servers. How about here? Well, if they're broken, they go in for repair. Technically, I think this would have been more interesting is if you had repairs going on weekly. Maybe we'll do that in class. That would be a nice thing to adjust here. But they just throw away anything that hasn't been repaired by week. So because of that, I don't have a +4 or 5 Rn. We're going to do that in class. So if whatever wasn't repaired last week gets carried over to the next week, I'll always have 80 servers when I sum these two. But I'm not going to have that in this case because they tell me the servers are not repaired after 1 week. They're just thrown away. So now I'm ready to do the nth step, because if I can do one step, I can do n steps. If my week was n, I would just repeat this process. This 80 was W sub n minus 1. So wherever I saw 80, I'm going to replace it with W sub n minus 1. This 0 was R sub n minus 1. So I'm just going to replace the 0 with R sub n minus 1. And now I have the equation for W sub n. I'm going to have an equation for each one of these variables. The R sub n, well, that one's a little easy. 0.10 times 80, 80 is W sub n minus 1. And so I replace the 80 with W sub n minus 1. And there's my system of equations. Good practices lead to making that bucket. All right, I'm going to clean this up a little bit. This part right here, W sub n, I can combine these two. That's 0.90 W sub n minus 1. And then I'm going to line them up. W sub n is equal to 0.90 W sub n minus 1 plus 0.55 R sub n minus 1. R sub n is equal to 0.10 W sub n minus 1 plus 0 R sub n minus 1. And notice I put the 0 there. Some of this is bookkeeping because everything's more complicated, and you just want to be able to make sure you don't make errors. I actually worked with my sister. My youngest sister is 15 years younger than me, and she was taking calculus when I was an associate professor. And I would always work with her on her math, and she would always skip steps. And I asked her why she's doing that. And she said, well, I'm in a hurry. And I said, okay, let's line up a clock. You and I are going to race through these problems. I'm going to stick with my good habits. You're going to do it your way. Well, what happened is when we hit the clock, I finished first, and she had mistakes in her answer. So we can practice this in class. If anybody wants to do this with me in class, and we'll do it, because good habits are actually going to cost you less time. She was always backtracking and trying to find what happened before because she wasn't bookkeeping in a smart way. So you have to bookkeep. All right, so then they ask you about after 4 weeks. What I would like to do is to do this in Excel. But in our section, you have video homework. This is your video homework. I want you to make an Excel sheet for your homework and load that into Notebook on Teams. So how do you do that? If you go on, if you're not in my section, you're just going to have to bear with me here because you're not going to see the answer until you actually do the work. So in Class Notebook, you just click Class Notebook, just to remind you. And I always do Open in Browser. So Open in Browser, and that's going to open this up. And I'm just going to go to Bills. If you go to Bills, you'll see something will open up, and you see that there's a lesson 28 and lesson 20. This one, I think, is it? Let's see. Can't seem to see. Yeah, this is lesson 27. So it goes up here. And so what you'll do is you'll just go onto this untitled page and say My Excel Sheet, and you'll just upload your answer here. So you go to Insert, File, Insert as Attachment, not File Printout, Insert as Attachment, and it will just load up here as an attachment. So I'll be grading these this week. Everybody has to do them. You won't make your points for this week if you don't. And that sounds like a threat, but it's not. It's just so that you can do all the tech things that you need to do at the same time as actually crunching through these problems. So let's do this WebAssign now. What you do is you go back. Let's go back to this. Let's snip out this equation. And let's pump it into here so I can see it. My eyesight's not that bad. So I'm going to make my headers as before. Weeks, N, number of working servers, W sub N, and number of servers for repair, that's R sub N. Good titles. I didn't used to do this, actually. My husband is a professional programmer, and he asked me why I'm just calling things letters, because if I have them named right, I'm not ever going to mess up. So I'm going to have this under here so I can see it. Start out with 0, there's 80 here, there's 0 here, my initial condition. Equals A2 plus 1. We've done this before. Number of working servers. That's equal to 0.90 times the one before it. The cell before 0.90 is B2. So I'm going to put B2. Plus 0.55 times Rn minus 1. That's the cell before in the C column. That's C2. So that's my W sub N equation. Now you might ask, well, why don't I have $2, D$2, C, all those things? Well, we're not worrying about that yet. And I don't think you actually have to worry about that. You're not scrolling, you're not changing parameters here. So right now, I'm just plugging in the 0.9 and the 0.55 would be things that maybe I have preserved over here so that I can change them and see the result. Then in the Rn equation, it's equal to 0.10 times Wn minus 1. The previous W is in cell B2, so I'm going to type B2, plus 0 times Rn minus, I just put it there, good habit, C2. And then let's move that to the side here because I don't need it anymore. I've got my equations in there. And then I'm going to pull it down. And they want it up to the 4th week. There's my 4th week right here. It's 63.422 and 6.624. So let's snip that out. see. Oh, look at that. There they have it, 63.4, there's 63.4 and 6.62. All right, so for our section, you have to upload that onto Class Notebook, your actual Excel. I want to make sure everybody can do that. We'll be doing that in class on Tuesday. You'll be sitting there in class, but so it's the second time you should do that. Remember, no one learns math. We just get used to it. So we're just going to keep getting used to these things, and that's how we learn.